I'm going to have you in mind, and if you can have in mind the brocha, that Hashem should bless us, that we have good comprehension, that we're learning L'Shem, and that we please Him, and we get a lot out of it too. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher krishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lasuk b'divrei Torah, v'arevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'filu b'fi amcha beit Yisrael, v'niyeh nachnu v'tzeitzeinu v'tzeitzei beit Yisrael, kulanu yodea shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai l'mei Torah l'mo Yisrael. Amen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chabadnu mikol amim v'natan lanu Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Okay. So what we're going to do is, I've been a bit remiss with it, is I'm going to just start off with a halacha for a minute, just two quick halachas, and then we fulfilled the Rambam's learning halacha, Gemara, Mishnayos, and Tanakh. So the one halacha I wanted to say is that sometimes when you're eating a fruit, you don't know what bracha to do, whether you do adama or you do a eitz. So the default position is, if you don't know, you always do ha'adama, because even a tree comes from the ground. I learned this with Jeff Kaplan. Yesterday we were learning at Hilchas Deis and the Mishnah Brura, etc. So that's number one. And then even bread or any sort of item, if you're not sure of the bracha, just say you're not sure if it's mizonot or hamotzi, etc. Shea kol actually does cover you for everything, even bread, believe it or not. Which is interesting. Although you still have to bench. Sorry guys, you can't get out of benching. It's not that easy. But the before bracha can be shea kol. Obviously, what makes something mizonot is if it's made with fruit juice, where it's not considered hamotzi. But even there's a question that if it's your main meal and it's mizonot, you still have to do the full benching of hamotzi, because mizonot was meant to be a very, very small sort of quantity. But if it's your meal, then it's hamotzi. And then there's something called a hefsek, which is a delay. So with a hefsek, that's a delay. If your food is piping hot, and it's too hot to eat immediately, you don't start to say a bracha where there's a hefsek and a delay. The whole reason between washing hands and doing hamotzi while you don't talk is that there shouldn't be a distraction between the two linking brachas. But even with normal food, if it's too hot, until it cools down to the point where you can eat it, you don't do a bracha. And the same when you're having an orange, you peel the orange first before you do the bracha and eat it. So there's no hefsek, there's no delay. Cool, guys, those are a couple of practical halachas. I thought it was pretty nice, and I thought let's get to the learning now. So you guys did amazing work last week. I must tell you, you made my week survive because you made it work. Yeah?
Gavin's got like a quarter of a face on his screen there.
Oh, sorry, guys.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So, it kind of goes in...
Okay, well, Damon, just put it so that I'm not looking at the ceiling a bit. And,
sorry, I'm just doing my best there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's not a problem. All right, let's begin. I'm just going to begin. So guys, we on the 8th daf. Congratulations, you put in a lot of work last week, and it showed. Why it showed is it was a pleasant experience for everybody because it flowed. The shiur actually flowed where you knew exactly what was going on. And I don't know how you felt, but I felt it really added to the quality. What did you guys feel?
Yeah, very good.
It was enjoyable.
Yeah,
Okay, you don't sound 100% sure.
No, it was good.
I thought it was very hard. I thought, sorry.
You thought?
I thought it was great. I mean, sometimes you really struggle and it feels like it's impossible. And then, when you get a little breakthrough, it makes it all worth it. But it wasn't a smooth sailing week. So certainly, yeah.
No, but listen, I'm not saying my shiur was...
The shiur was certainly, polished, and it always
tough.
Very nice. But it was, it was a rewarding week.
No, it's tough, but without the prep, it's impossible. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's not easy. It's not always fun. It's tough, but without the prep, there's no ways you can do it. I mean, Kevin, who's an absolute brilliant runner, will tell you that they had to make a qualification for the comrades because a lot of idiots thought that all of a sudden you could rock up at the comrades without having to qualify months before in terms of level of fitness. Everything in life takes preparation. And if you don't prepare, it's going to be disastrous. That's what I'm saying. And you guys, it was a lot better. Firstly, I want to congratulate you because at the 8th stuff, we're making really good progress. And do you know that the share at 40 minutes a day times 5 days, we're doing 200 minutes a week of attendance of shiurim, of Gemara shiurim. That is incredible. You guys weren't doing that a month ago. 200 minutes that you can account for a week in Shemaim is incredible. Plus all your prep work, which is probably, if it's an hour and 40 minutes in the week that you prepare for the shiurim, that's 300 minutes. So well done to you guys. And let's get started. We're at 8A1. Okay. So this is how the Gemara ended off. It ended off by,
I'm saying thank you. To give us those 1.5 hours prep, you're giving us about 300 minutes a week. It's phenomenal.
Pleasure.
It goes straight to your account your savings account in Olam Haba.
Thanks. I'm just trying to get out of Gehinnom. All right, let's get started. All right. Let's go to 8A1. And how 7B4 actually ended off was as follows. It turned around and said, well, how does the land get distributed? And obviously, we said that the damages are paid with superior land. The lenders are paid with average land, and the ketubah of a woman is paid with inferior land. And then we went through different scenarios. And the final scenario that hits on 8A1 is that says if he possesses only superior and inferior land, damages are paid with superior land, and the lender and the ketubah of a woman are paid with inferior land. Are you with me? Now, why is it paid with inferior land? Because there's no average land available to pay the lender, and therefore he's not entitled to collect from superior land. If anything, biblically is entitled to collect from inferior land, and he was upgraded with respect to average land so that people would lend him money. So in that case, obviously, it goes with the ketubah of a woman and paid with inferior land. Right. Now, it's on this question that's about to happen now that the Gemara brings a challenge of a brisa. It says, okay, so what about learning the middle case? What's the middle case? If he possesses average and inferior land, damages and the lender are paid with average land, and the ketubah of a woman is paid with inferior land. Are you with me? Let me say it again.
Yeah.
Very important. That damages are paid with, so if he's only got average and inferior land, damages and the lender are paid with average land, and the ketubah of a woman are paid with inferior land. Now, that doesn't seem contradictory until you assess what's going on here. What we're saying is, hang on a second, something here is a little bit off. We started the previous brisa where there was a question as to whether or not land was assessed in terms of the world at large. Do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
In 7B4. And this is why the question came up, because the Rav that was asking this question read this particular brisa and it didn't make sense on first reading. Let me tell you why. This question was actually brought in 7B3. Okay, and I'll tell you who asked the question. So Rav Shmuel Bar Abba from Akronia inquired of Rav Abba, when the court assesses land to determine which lands are considered superior, do you assess in terms of the damages own properties, or do they assess in terms of the world at large, right? This was Shmuel Bar Abba from Akronia, and he inquired of Rav Abba. So this is why the question is so brilliant, because he's looking at this and he says, all right, damages in the lender are paid with average land, and the woman's ketubah is paid with inferior land. Now, he's saying that there's something wrong here. What is he saying? That, hang on a second, if it's average land, it's not average land according to the person that owns the property, Because if he doesn't have superior land, the average land is his superior land. Does that make sense? And then it's saying, okay, so I understand why the damages are paid with the average land, because in terms of the owner of the property, his average land is the best he has. Therefore, it's superior, and therefore you pay the damages. But when you want to say that you pay the lender from that average land, you're saying, hang on, it's not average, because the person that owns the property it's the best land he has. So therefore, it's superior. So it's average in terms of what? Is it comparing it to something else? Or else you can say, well, so that's why I was asking, does the question make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
It does.
Okay, Kevin, does the question make sense? Does Gavin, the question make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so Kevin, explain to me the question, because maybe I haven't explained it properly. I just want to make sure you understand.
Okay, if usually damages are paid from superior land.
Correct.
And a divorced woman will get paid all the time with inferior, but if someone who possesses average or inferior land, the average land is their superior land. If you compare it to the inferior, there's only 2 bits of land that they have. So
correct, but then what's the problem here? What is the problem? There seems to be a big problem, and Rav Abba from Akronia picked it up and asked of the other Rav Abba. There is a problem. What's the problem?
In terms of the value.
No, in terms of the average land, what's the problem in this case?
In terms of the average land,
yeah,
it's not normally, it's not superior land as is normally known. So
no. Okay, so I'm going to unpack it again, guys, because sometimes just to do a review for a minute is going to help. So this is the problem, Kev, is that if you want to say that we assess in terms of the property owner's land, he's got 2 grades of land. He's got average and inferior. So we know the woman of the ketubah is paid with inferior land. And we know that the damages is paid with average land, in this case, because he doesn't have superior. And that average land is the best, choicest, most superior land that landowner has. So therefore, damages is paid with that average land because he doesn't have superior land. So that makes sense. It's superior to him. It's the best he has.
That is the question
is, the question is, how do you say that it's average land as far as the lender is concerned? Because it's actually superior land. It's the best land that that person possesses. So if you say it's the best land that the person possesses, why is it called average land? And it's called average land because it seems to be compared to an objective comparison of somebody else's land. You get what I'm saying? Otherwise, it wouldn't be called average. The person who owns it only has 2 grades of land. He's got the best land and he's got the land that's worth less than that. So that should be called superior land. If we say it's just judged on the damager's land or the owner's land, etc. So here we're saying, Rav Abba from Akronia is saying, listen, then we must be judging this according to a comparative factor, and that land is in terms of the world at large. What's the value in terms of the world at large? Now, can everybody hear the question now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, the Gemara then deflects this proof, and it says it's not necessarily the case. What is actually the case that we're dealing with in this particular brisa? He's dealing with the case where initially the debtor possessed superior quality land at the time that the loan took place. Okay, he's got 3 grades of land. Who's phone? Rav Chisda is saying, listen, that's not what we're actually talking about. Rav Chisda is saying that this brisa is dealing with a different issue. He was going to say, let's get the case clear. Originally, the landowner had superior land, average, and inferior land. And what happened is when he lent money, lent money, he mortgaged the property to the person that lent him the money. There was a lien on the property as collateral. And that lien for obviously lending is average property. So that took place. He subsequently sold the superior quality land. And even now, though that the average land has become the landowner's superior land compared to the other land he has, the property lien is still on the average land. That doesn't fall short. Because this financial arrangement of signing the average land as collateral in terms of a mortgage for the money that comes was at the point when he had superior, average, and inferior land. Are you with me? In other words, I'm a bank. I'm lending you money for a property. I've got a mortgage and I own the property deed for your average property. I'm just giving you a very, very simple case. So that property is collateral of mine. I don't care what else you sell. That property belongs to me. So this is what Rav Chisda is saying. And we know it, I'm using the modern example of property and mortgages because that's what we understand today. But in those days, it worked different. Say the guy wanted to buy a car or a horse or whatever he wanted to buy. And the guy said, I'll lend you money at no interest, but you pay back with average land. And you sign that if you default on payment, either you pay me in cash or I can take that amount of average land to the value of the money I'm lending you. Fine. Then he subsequently sold his superior quality land. That doesn't affect the arrangement I have in lending the money. That property of that average land, it's now your superior land, but it makes no difference to me. You still owe it to me because the arrangement came into effect before you sold your superior land. And the Gemara provides support for the interpretation of Rav Chisda. So let me tell you why. It says it's also reasonable because it brings another price, a second price, and it says if the debtor possessed average and inferior land, damages are paid with average land, and the lender and the ketubah of the woman are paid with inferior land. Now, these two prices obviously contradict each other. Why do they contradict each other? Let's look at the first price quickly. The first price says that damages are paid with average land and lenders is paid with average land and a woman's ketubah with inferior land. Fine. The second price is saying something different. It's saying damages are paid with average land and the land and the ketubah of the woman are paid with inferior land. Now, they clearly don't match. So Rav Chisda wants to learn that this isn't a case of it taking the property of the world at large. It's saying a case here, what's the case? That in the first case, we give the lender average quality land because he did have superior quality land at that particular time. So the average was mortgaged to the person that he owed money to, and a damager can also collect from that same land if there's enough land. Otherwise, obviously, damager gets first dibs at it, etc., etc. The second case, Rav Chisda says, is that the reason why the damages pay with average land is the guy never had superior land, so it's the most superior he's got. So the damages are paid with average land, and then the lender and the ketubah of the woman are paid with inferior land. So he's saying at that point, the lender is only entitled to collect from inferior land because the average land, which would consider average in terms of the world at large, is actually superior land, and the lender has no business collecting from that. So always in a case that there's a biblical enactment, guys, what's the biblical enactment? That they're only entitled to collect from inferior land, and then according to Rav Ula and the rabbis, it was upgraded to where they could collect from average land. So it would not be, the borrower would not have his loans not lent to him because it was attractive for a lender to get back land that he could sell easily, because otherwise to sell land in the Cape Flats is difficult. They did not grant superior land to the lender because they didn't want a lender to have eye on the property and make sure that the person borrowing defaulted didn't have money and he could take the most superior property. So it was a fair system. So in the case where there's no superior land, it goes back to the biblical enactment where the lender can only collect from inferior land. Okay?
Sorry.
I'm not finished yet, Gab. You can just now, but not yet. Gab, not yet. Let me finish. So damages are paid with average land, and the land in the ketub of the woman are paid with inferior land. So it's saying even if you, it's still average. So then obviously the question that's going to arise is, what do you mean average? It's still the superior compared to that landowner's property in the second brisa. Okay. So it says first, shouldn't we conclude? In the first brisa, we deal with the case where the debtor had superior land at the time the loan took place, but subsequently sold it. While here in the second brisa, we deal with the case where the debtor did not have superior land and subsequently sell it. So the fact that the contradiction between the brisa can only be resolved in this manner supports the interpretation that was advanced by the Gemara above, that the first brisa speaks of a case where the debtor originally owned superior land and subsequently sold it. So in a case where the debtor doesn't have superior land, the lender collects from obvious superior, average, and inferior. In this case, he can only collect from average or inferior, but because his average is now superior compared to the land that he has, the lender can only collect from inferior. Okay, so Gavin, what did you want to ask?
That's a simple question. What I don't understand is, surely he's got a lien on that property, so he should never get. So that superior land he should be able to claim from. It doesn't make sense. If he didn't have a lien, I understand that he has to get it from the inferior quality land. But if he had a lien on it, then he's protected.
Correct.
Okay, so it's a good point. Firstly, Gav, I appreciate you waiting because you did try and whack me mid-sentence, so I do appreciate you waiting. It's appreciated. It is a good point, and it's going to come to be resolved. It is going to come to be resolved because a property. You see, the thing of it is, at that particular point, it's not like it was necessarily a fixed lien because it wasn't on the entire property. In other words, say for a damages action, it doesn't mean the person gets your whole field. It means firstly, let's go back to how it worked. You're entitled to superior quality land because if you if somebody damaged you, you needed to recover your financial losses quickly. So the reason they gave you superior was in order to sell it and recover your costs. Okay? In terms of the lender was only entitled to inferior land biblically, but it was upgraded to average so that people wouldn't be discouraged from lending him money. But often the money needed was not an entire field of average quality property. It might have been just a portion of that percentile-wise. He might have needed 40 zuz to do the plumbing in his house or electrical. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's not a standard property lien in that you're entitled to the whole property. You're entitled to collect from that land. So as long as that land is still available when the arrangement was made, you've got an option. But in order for that land to be available, there has to be comparatives within your own land. Meaning, a lender can only collect average land if it's average to you. This is what Rav Chista was saying. In other words, you've got superior, you've got average, and you've got inferior. So in a case where you've got superior, average, and inferior, and you owe money, he can only collect from what your average land is. He's saying we're not talking about the world at large. And if you don't have, if you don't have, then in this case where you collect from, the only reason you're collecting from average land is because the guy had 3 pockets of land, and at the time that you made the financial contract, and then when he sold the superior quality land, it's still on that property. But at the point where, and this is what's going to answer your question, you only have 2 grades of land. You've got what they were calling here average. Is it meaning it's really not great, the land? It's average, but it's the best you have. And the other one is even worse than that. Then the property lien, as you said, is going to be then on the not on the superior land, because a collector, a lender is not entitled to collect from superior land. So your best land that you would have, according to Rav Chista, If you only had average or inferior, would go to the damages, the average land, because that's the best you have. And the inferior would go for the lender and the woman's ketubah. Why to the woman's ketubah? Because that's the worst land. And why to the lender? Because if you don't have average land, then the biblical default comes into play that you can only collect from the inferior, meaning it's the average land that guy's got, but by quality standards, it's inferior. Because you're not entitled to collect from his better quality land, which is the superior.
But I thought the lien was over that superior land because that superior land was average at the time. And at the time, we took a lien.
No, Kabb, you didn't read the daf. I'm going to repeat. You didn't read it. You didn't understand it properly.
No, obviously didn't. But it comes
so what I'm saying,
down. It does say that. When you carry on a little bit later,
but when it's talking about that in terms of in collecting from a buyer, etc., it's talking about where a guy's got 3 grades of property land that he sells. And what I'm saying is a lien on that particular property only comes into effect when you've got 3 grades of land. But it doesn't come into effect if you've only got 1 parcel of land. So in other words, we went through this on DAF 7b4, where it said if you only have inferior land, the damager, the lender, and the ketubah of the woman collect only from inferior. It went through this on 7b4. And it says if you've only got average, they all collect from average. And if you only got superior, they all collect from superior. The case where you collect from superior, average, and inferior is only in the case when you've got 3 pockets of land. And then 7b4 comes to say, well, if you've only got superior and superior and average, that was what 7b4 was about. A standard property lien can only occur when you've only got 3 grades of property. Otherwise, you can only collect from what the guy has. What else are you going to do? What else are you going to do, Gav?
Okay. So further down, are we looking at stronger lien?
What?
Further down, because we come across it where he can take from superior land. You'll see. Carry on and you'll see it comes up.
Gav, I've learned the daf off by heart with respect. And what I'm saying is the Chazorah on 7b4 with respect goes through when you can't collect on a lien. And if you go through 7b4, it states very clearly before it gets to the remainder of the 8th daf and the 9th daf, etc., where it talks about the property liens. The premise of the argument is that there has to be 3 grades of land where the buyer actually gets it in succession or at one time, etc. But the premise is always that there are 3 grades of land in that case. And the DAF in 7b4 talks about what happens if there are not 3 grades of land. That's what we did on Thursday and Wednesday.
Right. Something later. Carry on with the show. I'll send you something that...
I don't want to carry on with the show because everybody's missed it. So, do you remember that part in 7b4? I'm going to go through it a second.
I do. But later on, when he sells land, you'll see the lien does apply.
Kevin, it's only in a case where the original debtor had 3 pockets of land. Look here, I'm going to repeat 7b4. You're missing it. Kevin, I'm telling you, you're missing it.
No, I obviously am, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'll go back and read it, Damon. It's fine.
All right, let me read 7b4 for you guys, because unless we sort this out, we're not going to make progress, okay? It says the Gemara objects to this conclusion. They challenge the view from the Brisa. This is on 7b4. If one owed money to the damaged party and lent a woman for a ketubah, and he possesses only superior quality land, all of them collect from superior quality land. Okay, Gav? So that's proving that the property lien is only in effect in terms of the sort of grade of land and not necessarily on that property. And the proof of it is that we learned even before in 7b3 that if he didn't want to sell that particular land, didn't want to pay the debt with that particular land, he can't be demanded from the lender to pay with that land as long as he's got land similar in quality that fulfills the legal requirement, which proves there's not a property lien on that particular property. There's a property lien in terms of the quality of the property, but not on that actual property. So that's different to modern law. In other words, modern law states, when you see today, we don't take property as collateral. The law states that only a bank or a financial institution that lends money in order that you pay for your house can attach that particular property as collateral to take it back if you if you default on your payments. But in those days, the property lien was on the quality of the land. It wasn't on that actual land, because people would almost leverage or use their property as collateral to the value of the money they were borrowing. So in other words, if they were borrowing only, if a field was worth 1,000 zuz and he wanted to borrow 80 zuz, he wouldn't have a lien on that whole property. He was entitled to that grade of property. The lien or the contract was on that grade of property, if available.
All right, David.
Does that make sense?
No, carry on. I understand you 100%. Carry on. Just carry on.
Okay, but do you understand it, Gab?
No, I understand you clearly, 100%.
Okay, so what it's saying is, all of them, this isn't Gemara 7 before, collect from superior land if he only possesses superior. If he only has average land, they all collect from average. If he only has inferior land, they all collect from inferior.
I did read that.
Okay.
It's later on when it tells them that it gets confusing, but we'll talk about it. Let's get you there, and then I'll see.
Okay, but this is answering your question, and your question specifically was, isn't there a lien on that particular property? And the question is great. Don't get me wrong. I think the question is great. It just means that there wasn't a chazorah done, which I don't blame you. Your time's limited, on the daf we did on Thursday. And that covered this issue. That's all I'm saying. Okay,
right.
but
I remember it. I was just talking about, it comes up a little bit later when they start setting when the guy
sells. No, but in the case where it comes up later, it's only when, in fact, the original debtor had 3 grades of land and was selling them either at one time or succession. He had superior, average, and inferior. And therefore, property lien would not occur on that particular property, but on that grade of land, providing the guy had 3 grades of land.
All right. Okay, so continue, and it'll come up, and then I'll get more clarity. I've understood you perfectly till now. Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay. So according to Rav Chisda, he's saying, listen, this doesn't really have to do with the world at large. What he's saying is, in the first case, when the contract was made, the property owner had 3 grades of land. He had superior, average, inferior grades of land, right? Fine. Then the guy loaned him money while he had all 3 grades and said, you can collect from average land. He said, cool, no problem. He subsequently sold his superior land because he was in debt. And the guy is saying to him, listen, when we did the contract, you still have average quality land. The fact that it's now superior to you because you sold your superior quality of land, that's not my problem. At the time when we made an arrangement, you had superior quality. It might be your superior now, but it's average compared to what you have. It's not my problem you sold the land. You owe me from the average quality of land. And the damager is going to say, listen, the best land you got, I'm going to take it for whatever you owe me. Fine. And then the woman gets from her inferior. The second case Rav Chisda says, in terms of the second brisa, is he says very, very clearly the following. There's only 2 pockets of land. The guy never had superior quality. He had average and he had inferior. And when we say average, we're saying, listen, the land was no great shakes, but it was the best that he had. Okay? It had nothing to do with the world at large. The inferior land, you couldn't grow a cactus. And the average quality of land, you could barely grow a cactus. And he had nothing better. So for him, his average was superior and his inferior was, the next grade down. So the damages would be paid from the average because it's the best that the guy has. And the lender, and the woman's ketubah obviously collects from inferior. And the lender he can't collect from the average land because it's the superior land that the guy actually has. So that never gets paid to a lender. That goes to a damager. So he collects from inferior, because the original biblical enactment was as follows, is that if the guy doesn't have that quality of land, the default position is that the lender collects from inferior land. That was the biblical enactment. He only can collect from average land if the guy has superior, average, and lower quality, so as not to discourage the granting of loans. But the guy doesn't have 3 grades of land. His average land is superior to what he owns. So therefore, the default position is the biblical enactment that he can collect from inferior, same as the woman of the ketubah. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we're going to end off on this note.
You've got 30 seconds.
I know, we're going to end off on this note. Guys, have a wonderful day. And thank you, Gavin, for your question. Thank you. It was good.
Yeah.
We fought l'shem shamayim. That's all. Never personal.
No, it was great. It was good. Thanks, guys.
Cheers,
Really.
guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well done, Damon.